Dinosaurs are not what you think they are. For over a century, scientists have been digging up creatures so bizarre they had to throw out the textbook and start over. From feathered nightmare herbivores to bat-winged gliders the size of pigeons. Today I'm breaking down the weirdest dinosaurs ever discovered and explaining why they're so strange, starting with one that fooled scientists for over 50 years, Therizinosaurus. In 1948, a Soviet Mongolian expedition pulled a pair of 2.4-meter forearms out of the Gobi Desert. That's nearly 8 feet of arm. And the scientists who found them took one look and said, yeah, that's a giant sea turtle. They were wrong. Very, very wrong. But here's the thing. It took until the 2000s and 10s to figure out what this animal actually was. Paleontologists had to track down poached skulls from private collectors just to assemble a complete picture. 50 years of guesswork, and the answer turned out to be weirder than anyone imagined. Therizinosaurus was a 10-meter, 5-ton theropod, roughly the same size as a T-Rex, but instead of a mouthful of bone-crushing teeth, it had a duck-like beak. It likely sported a pronounced hump on its back, was covered in feathers, and spent its time wading through shallow water eating plants. This thing looked like Edward Scissorhands crossed with a giant turkey. In those claws, they reached up to a meter long, the longest of any land animal in Earth's entire history. You'd think they were built for killing. They weren't. The claws were hollow and fragile, completely useless for combat. They were designed for pulling down tree branches, like a massive ground sloth stripping leaves off a canopy. A nightmare predator that turned out to be a weird feathered bush forager. If scientists got this one wrong for half a century, buckle up, because the next dinosaur on this list fooled them even harder. Dinosaur. Same desert, same decade, same expedition, and somehow scientists found another pair of giant 2.4-meter arms with massive hooked claws, and once again they had absolutely zero idea what they were looking at. The name they gave it? Dinocaris. Literally translates to terrible hand, and for over 50 years that's all anyone knew. Just the hands. Here's where it gets weird, because solving this mystery wasn't just science, it was a crime thriller. The breakthrough came when researchers, led by Yongnam Lee, tracked down smuggled Dinocaris skulls that had been poached from Mongolia, fenced through Japan, and ended up in Germany. Paleontologists had to literally follow the trail of stolen fossils across 3 countries just to figure out what this animal looked like. And the reveal? Nobody was ready. Dinocaris turned out to be a 7-ton, 11-meter-long, duck-billed omnivore with a camel hump on its back, a waddling gait, and feathers. Not a terrifying apex predator, not some nightmare slasher. A giant feathered humpback duck that waddled through rivers scooping up whatever it could find. Stomach contents confirmed it ate fish, rocks called gastroliths that it used to grind plant matter, and random vegetation. It was basically a prehistoric garbage disposal. Those enormous claws that had scientists terrified for decades, they were likely used to dig through river mud for food, not for killing. The hump was probably packed with muscle and viscera, not fat like a camel. Thermoregulation with that massive body and possible feather coverage would have been an absolute nightmare. Lee himself called it one of the weirdest ornithomimosaur dinosaurs beyond our imagination. And he's the one who spent years tracking it down. If the guy who solved the mystery says it broke his brain, that tells you everything. But if you think a duck-billed garbage disposal with a camel hump is strange, wait until you see what evolution did with wings, YQI. For 160 million years, scientists were pretty confident about one thing. There are exactly 2 ways to build a wing. You either go the bird route with feathers, or you go the bat and pterosaur route with membranes stretched over bone. 2 options, that's it. Then a farmer in Hebei province, China, dug up something in 2007 that broke everything. Meet Yi Qi, which literally translates to strange wing. And honestly, that might be the most accurate name in all of paleontology. This thing was the size of a pigeon, about 380 grams. You could hold it in one hand, but what it lacked in size, it made up for in sheer biological impossibility. Yi Qi had feathers and membrane wings, both, at the same time, on the same animal. It used a completely novel bone called the styloform, a rod jutting straight out from its wrist that supported its membrane wing like nothing seen outside its own tiny family of dinosaurs. Only one other species, Ambopteryx, shared this structure. That's it. 2 animals in the entire fossil record with this bizarre skeletal feature, both from the same small family, both doing something no other dinosaur ever attempted. The holotype specimen is so well preserved you can actually see the impressions of both the feathers and the wing membranes pressed into the rock. Scientists looked at this and had to completely rethink what they thought they knew about how flight evolved in vertebrates. But here's the thing, Yichi probably couldn't even fly properly. Its pectoral muscles weren't strong enough for sustained powered flight. It was almost certainly a glider, launching itself from tree branches and catching air currents with those hybrid wings. Meanwhile, its short, blunt skull and forward-pointing teeth suggest it spent its time probing bark for insects, like a tiny prehistoric woodpecker that also happened to be part bat. Only one specimen has ever been found. One. So we know almost nothing about whether males and females look different, whether wing structure varied between individuals, or how this animal actually lived day to day. And the Scanceraopterygid family it belonged to? Gone. Completely. No descendants, no evolutionary offshoots, no trace. An entire branch of the dinosaur family tree just stopped existing, and we still don't know why. Something that small and that strange shouldn't haunt you, but it does. And speaking of things that haunt paleontologists, wait until you see what happens when you give a dinosaur 500 teeth. Spinosaurus. You already know this one, or at least you think you do. Spinosaurus has been in Jurassic Park 3. It's topped every biggest dinosaur list ever made, and it's been the go-to answer for what's scarier than a T-Rex for over 2 decades. But here's the thing, almost everything you were told about Spinosaurus in the last 10 years is probably wrong. Let me explain. Spinosaurus was first discovered in Egypt in 1912, and from the very beginning, it confused everyone. At 50 feet long, it's the largest predatory dinosaur ever found. Not the largest dinosaur overall, but the largest predator. Bigger than T-Rex, bigger than Giganotosaurus. It's been called the poster child of strange dinosaurs, and that title is completely earned. Then came 2014 and everything changed. Researchers proposed something nobody had ever seriously considered before. Spinosaurus was aquatic, not just liked water aquatic, full-on underwater pursuit predator aquatic, dense bones for submersion, a paddle-like tail for propulsion, the whole package. It became the flagship of a new era of dinosaur media. Documentaries were rewritten, artwork was overhauled. Spinosaurus was now a terrifying sea monster that hunted fish underwater like a 50-foot crocodile-dolphin hybrid, and it was probably wrong. Computer modeling of updated skeletal reconstructions showed that Spinosaurus would have been a slow, unstable surface swimmer, reaching only about 0.8 meters per second. That's far too slow for open water pursuit predation. Worse, the model showed it was likely too buoyant to even submerge effectively. The massive sail on its back, once imagined as some kind of aquatic propulsion aid, likely served the same function as the sails on basilisk lizards and sailfin lizards today. Visual display for dominance or attracting mates, not swimming. So, what was Spinosaurus actually doing? The current consensus is far less cinematic. It waded in shallow rivers and coastal environments like a giant crocodile, ambushing fish from the shore. Its crocodile-like jaws and interlocking teeth were built for gripping slippery prey, not chasing it underwater. The biggest predatory dinosaur ever was basically a very large fishing bird. And that's what makes Spinosaurus genuinely fascinating, not the Hollywood version, but the real story of how science builds an idea, celebrates it, and then has the honesty to tear it back down when the evidence doesn't hold up. But if you think a dinosaur's reputation getting completely demolished is wild, wait until you see what evolution did to the next one's entire body plan. Parasaurolophus, this dinosaur could talk. Well, not talk exactly, but it could make a sound, and we actually know what it sounded like. That alone makes Parasaurolophus one of the most fascinating dinosaurs ever discovered, because for most species, we're guessing at behavior. Here, we have proof. That massive curved crest projecting backward from its skull, for decades, nobody could figure out what it was for. Paleontologists threw out every theory imaginable: a snorkel for breathing underwater, a thermoregulator for cooling blood, a battering ram for fighting rivals, all wrong. CT scans revealed the truth, and it's way cooler than any of those guesses. The interior of that crest is hollow, but not just empty space, like it's a winding labyrinth of hollow tubes and air cavities structurally similar to the tubing inside a trombone. It's a musical instrument built into the dinosaur's skull. Researchers at Sandia national laboratories ran computational airflow simulations through a reconstructed crest and actually rendered the sound it would have produced. A deep, resonating rumble that could shift in pitch, described as resembling a crumhorn, a Renaissance wind instrument, or, if you want the more honest description, a goose attempting to play a vuvuzela. That's a real sound that a real dinosaur made 75 million years ago. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Each Parasaurolophus likely had a unique voice. Subtle variations in crest structure between individuals would have produced slightly different tones and frequencies, essentially giving every single one a vocal fingerprint, the same way modern birds are identifiable by their specific calls, and they were built to hear it too. The ear bones in Parasaurolophus were large and specifically structured for detecting low-frequency sounds, exactly the range their crests produced. They weren't just making noise, they were having conversations. Fossil evidence of mixed-age herds suggests this acoustic system served real social purposes, guiding juveniles through dense vegetation, coordinating group movement across open terrain, establishing dominance without physical confrontation. The crest likely had bright coloration on top of all this, making it a combined acoustic and visual communication system more sophisticated than anyone expected from a herbivorous dinosaur. These weren't mindless animals wandering through the Cretaceous. They had individual voices, social hierarchies, and a communication network that would put most modern mammals to shame. And if that level of social complexity surprises you, wait until you see the dinosaur that looked like evolution just threw random animal parts into a blender. Pygomastax. This dinosaur was literally hiding in plain sight for over half a century. The specimen sat in a Harvard storage room, untouched, unstudied, completely ignored since it was excavated from South Africa in the 1960s. Nobody knew what it was. Then, in 1983, paleontologist Paul Sereno was casually browsing through the collection and stumbled across a skeleton that would turn out to be one of the strangest animals ever discovered. And when I say strange, I mean every single feature on this thing sounds like it was designed by a committee that wasn't communicating. Pygomastax was smaller than a house cat. It stood under 2 feet tall. Its head looked like someone glued together parts from completely different animals. At the front, a parrot's beak, short and sharp, built for cropping vegetation. Normal enough, but immediately behind that beak sat a pair of stabbing canine fangs with self-sharpening edges. The teeth scraped against each other every time the jaw opened and closed, meaning they stayed razor sharp through constant use. This thing maintained its own weapons automatically. Here's where it gets weird. Behind those nightmare fangs, standard shearing teeth designed for processing plants, that's it. Pygomastax was a committed herbivore. It ate leaves and seeds. The stabbing fangs weren't for hunting, they were for fighting other Pygomastax. Territorial disputes, mate competition, the exact same reason modern tusked animals like musk deer have fangs. This cat-sized dinosaur was getting into knife fights with other cat-sized dinosaurs over territory. But wait, it gets better. A closely related heterodinosaur called Tianyulong, discovered in China, preserved something incredible: integument. It was covered head to tail in stiff, non-branching bristles, like a porcupine. These weren't feathers, they didn't branch or split. They were rigid quills almost certainly used for defensive display. Because Pygomastax belongs to the same family, paleontologists believe it likely sported the same covering, making this tiny animal look bigger and more threatening than anything under 2 feet tall has any right to look. The bristles were likely brightly colored too, turning Pygomastax into a walking warning sign. So let me paint the complete picture for you. Parrot head, porcupine coat, self-sharpening stabbing fangs, pure herbivore. It used its terrifying mouth weapons exclusively to poke rivals its own size. It lived around 200 million years ago in the early Jurassic and vanished long before most of the dinosaurs people actually know about ever existed. The ecological conditions that supported a fanged porcupine parrot the size of a kitten simply didn't last, and there was nowhere left for it to go. And the fact that it sat in a drawer at Harvard for 50 years before anyone even noticed might be the most Pygomastax thing possible. Too small, too weird, too easy to overlook. But if you think a cat-sized herbivore with stabbing fangs is the peak of dinosaur absurdity, the next one might actually top it. Carnotaurus. Everyone loves to make fun of T-Rex's arms. It's basically a meme at this point. But here's the thing. T-Rex's arms were actually actually pretty muscular and functional compared to what Carnotaurus was working with. Carnotaurus makes T-Rex look like an arm wrestling champion. The name literally means meat-eating bull, and it earned that title from the two thick horns sitting right above its eyes, and these weren't small decorative bumps like you'd see on Allosaurus or Ceratosaurus. These horns were formed from the frontal bones of the skull, projected outward and upward, and were covered in keratin sheaths that made them significantly larger in life than the bone cores alone suggest. No other carnivorous theropod had anything like them. Zero. The leading hypothesis for why a predator needed bull horns, they weren't for hunting at all. Paleontologists believe males used them for intraspecific combat, ramming into each other to compete for mates or territory. Basically, imagine two 7.5-meter predators headbutting each other like bighorn sheep. That's Carnotaurus, but the arms are the real showstopper. Carnotaurus had the most vestigial forelimbs of any known theropod. They were so absurdly small that they may not have even been visible outside the body wall during life. The fingers couldn't move independently because of extensive bone fusion. The entire arm was essentially a decorative stub. And here's the part that sticks with you. Paleontologists have noted that if Carnotaurus hadn't gone extinct, its descendants might have lost the arms entirely. Evolution was literally in the process of deleting them. So no arms and relatively weak jaws for a predator of its size. How did this thing survive? Speed. Carnotaurus was built like a biological drag racer. Massively enlarged cauda femoralis muscles running along the tail powered its legs with incredible force, making it one of the fastest large theropods known. The trade-off? That same muscular tail was incredibly stiff, which made rapid turning nearly impossible. Carnotaurus was a straight line sprinter. If you ran in a zigzag, you'd probably survive. Probably. The proposed hunting strategy puts the whole picture together. Use that ridiculous speed to chase prey in a straight line, close the distance fast, then use the horns rather than the jaws to deliver the killing blow. Skin impressions confirm it was covered in a mosaic of small, non-overlapping scales, completing the image of what is essentially a fast-moving bull that happens to eat meat. It's the villain design that evolution actually produced. Horns, tiny useless arms, built exclusively for straight line speed, terrible at turning, legitimately threatening, and deeply absurd at the same time. But if Carnotaurus sounds like the weirdest predator on this list, wait until you see what evolution did to an herbivore's mouth. Nigersaurus. Nigersaurus might be the hardest dinosaur on this entire list to actually picture in your head, and that's exactly why it's the perfect one to end on. This was a 30-foot sauropod, a genuinely large animal, but its skull looked like it was assembled backwards. The muzzle was wider at the front than at the back, a proportion found in literally zero other sauropods in the fossil record. The front of its face has been described as resembling a pair of giant shovels, not a metaphor. That's what it looked like. Now open those shovels up and look inside. 500 teeth, arranged in 68 rows on the upper jaw and 60 rows on the lower jaw. Every single tooth was replaced every 14 days, which is faster than sharks replace theirs. The entire front of this animal's skull was essentially a constantly renewing industrial grass-cutting attachment bolted onto a dinosaur's body. Nothing else in the fossil record comes close to this level of dental absurdity. And the way it used that mouth was equally strange. Nigersaurus was a ground-level browser, its head pointed downward at roughly 67 degrees, mowing vegetation the way modern cattle graze, just sweeping its face across the ground to crop whatever was in its path. Its neck was short for a sauropod, built for lateral range of motion rather than reaching up into trees. This thing wasn't looking at the canopy, it was looking at dirt. Here's where it gets weird. CT scans of the skull revealed a paradox. Nigersaurus had exceptional vision, with eye placement producing a near 360-degree field of view, crucial for watching for predators while its head was pointed straight down. But it had an almost completely undeveloped sense of smell. That's bizarre for a ground-feeding herbivore surrounded by predators, including the enormous crocodilian Sarcosuchus. It could see everything but smell nothing. Those CT scans were actually a milestone. Nigersaurus was the first dinosaur skull to be comprehensively studied through CT scanning and digital reconstruction. One of the strangest skulls in the fossil record became the one that pushed paleontological technology forward. And here's a detail that still gets me. A hatchling jaw has been found small enough to fit on a silver dollar. Even at that size, the baby already had had the full weird shovel face. It came out of the egg looking like that, and that's the thing about this entire list. Evolution doesn't aim for optimal. It doesn't aim for normal. It generates experiments. Some of those experiments are 500-toothed lawnmowers with backwards proportioned heads and no sense of smell. Some are bat-winged pigeons. Some are fanged parrots covered in quills. None of it makes sense until you stop expecting it to. That's what makes all of this worth paying attention to. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every single dinosaur myth you still believe explained, click the video on the screen now.